The wolves of Thornhall had buried 3 small graves in the frozen earth. For 7 days, Alpha Theron had not spoken. For 7 days, his pack had mourned the pups taken by the blizzard, the heirs lost before they'd ever learned to shift. And for 7 days, the Alpha's heart had turned to something colder than the snow that had stolen his children. Then she appeared at the edge of the bleak wood, a human. Barefoot in the drifts, frost clinging to her hair, her lips blue with cold she should not have survived. In her arms, wrapped against her chest and breathing, impossibly breathing, were the 3 pups everyone had given up for dead. The wolves surrounded her instantly, fangs bared, ready to tear her apart for the crime of existing on their land. Humans meant death in Thornhall. That was law. That was instinct. That was centuries of blood and betrayal carved into pack memory. But Alpha Theron raised his hand, and his wolves went still. He stared at the human female clutching his children, this inexplicable creature who had walked through a killing blizzard carrying 3 wolf pups against her own body heat. She should have frozen. The pups should have been corpses. Neither truth held. "She lives," Theron said. The pack erupted in shock. Why would an alpha who had lost everything spare the one creature his kind was born to destroy? The human didn't understand either. Not until he made his terms clear. She could stay. She could nurse his pups back to strength. She would be given shelter, food, and protection from the winter that should have killed her. But she would remain Omega, the lowest rank, less than servant. She would never be pack. And when the pups no longer needed her warmth, she would be cast back into the cold she came from. Neither of them understood how impossible that vow would be. The blizzard had been hunting her for 2 days. Wren could no longer feel her feet. She could no longer feel much of anything below her knees, and some distant part of her mind knew that meant she was dying. But the bundles against her chest were still warm. 3 small heartbeats fluttered against her own, faint and fading, but present, alive. That was the only thing that mattered now. She had found them in a ravine 3 miles back, half buried in a snowdrift that should have been their tomb. 3 wolf pups, too young to shift, their fur matted with ice, their bodies barely clinging to life. Any sane person would have walked past. Any sane person would have known that wolf pups meant wolves nearby, and wolves meant death for a human caught in their territory. But Wren had stopped being sane the night her village burned. She pressed on through the drifts, each step a negotiation with a body that wanted to surrender. The wind screamed through the pines, throwing ice into her face, blinding her. She couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. She didn't need to. She could feel where she was going the same way she could feel the pups' heartbeats, the same way she had always felt things she shouldn't be able to feel. The pulse of living things, the thread that connected breath to breath. The territory ahead thrummed with life, dense and fierce and burning hot compared to the emptiness behind her. Wolf territory. The bleak wood. She had heard stories about this place even as a child, back when her village still stood, back when she still had a name that wasn't cursed. The wolves of Thornhall were ancient, brutal, and utterly without mercy for humans. Their alpha was said to be more beast than man, a creature who had watched his own mate die and emerged from that grief as something hardened beyond feeling. Wren was walking directly into his domain, carrying his pups. If the cold didn't kill her, the wolves would. She knew that with absolute certainty, the same way she knew the pups' heartbeats were growing weaker by the hour. But there was nowhere else to go. Behind her lay the ashes of everything she'd ever known. Ahead lay monsters who might tear her apart before she could explain. Between those options, she chose the one that might let these 3 small creatures live. The tree line broke without warning, and Wren stumbled into a clearing. The wind dropped. The snow still fell, but gentler here, as if the forest itself had decided to pause. And in that sudden stillness, she saw them. Wolves. at least a dozen, emerging from the shadows between the pines like smoke given form. Their eyes caught the dim light and reflected it back. Gold and amber and pale, terrible silver. They were enormous, each one larger than any wolf had a right to be, and they were looking at her the way predators looked at prey. Wren stopped. Her legs wouldn't have carried her further anyway. She could feel their life forces pressing against her awareness, hot and hostile and ancient. These were not animals. These were something else entirely, something her village had whispered about in fearful tones before they'd decided she was the monster in their midst. The largest wolf stepped forward. Black fur, silver eyes, a presence that made the air feel heavier. He bared his teeth, and a growl rolled through the clearing like distant thunder. This is it, Wren thought. This is where I die. But her arms tightened around the bundles against her chest, and she did something that surprised even herself. She dropped to her knees in the snow, not in surrender but in offering. She pulled back the edge of her cloak, revealing the 3 small faces nestled against her body. 3 wolf pups, breathing. Alive. Yours, she managed through frozen lips. I found them. They're yours. The growling stopped. Every wolf in the clearing went utterly still, and in that silence Wren heard something she hadn't expected. A sharp intake of breath. A sound that was almost human. And then the black wolf was shifting, bones cracking, fur receding, until a man stood where the beast had been. He was tall, taller than anyone she had ever seen, with black hair that fell past his shoulders and a face that might have been hewn from granite and grief. His eyes were the same silver they had been in wolf form, and they were fixed on the pups in her arms with an expression she couldn't name. How? He said. His voice was raw, broken. They were dead. We searched for 3 days. They were dead. Wren's vision was starting to blur. The cold was finally winning. But she held his gaze and forced the words out. They weren't. They were dying. But they weren't gone. I felt them. His eyes snapped to her face and a flicker crossed his features. Not warmth. Nothing close to warmth. But something that wasn't immediate violence. You're human, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Humans don't survive the Bleakwood. No, Wren agreed. They don't. The world tilted. She felt herself falling, felt the snow rushing up to meet her. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was the alpha's face, those silver eyes staring down at her with something that might have been shock. The last thing she felt was hands catching her before she hit the ground. She woke to warmth and the sound of arguing. For a long moment, Wren simply lay still, trying to understand why she wasn't dead. Her body ached in ways she hadn't known were possible. Her fingers burned as blood returned to frozen tissue. But she was breathing. She was inside somewhere, lying on something soft, covered in furs that smelled like pine and wood smoke and wolf. The voices filtered through slowly. She's human, Theron. Human. You know the law as well as any of us. I know what she is. Then you know what has to happen. We don't owe her anything. She probably stole the pups herself. Staged this entire... She carried them through a 3-day blizzard, Corwin. Barefoot. She was half dead when she reached us. If she stole them, she stole them to save them. Or she's a trap. A distraction. The voice, Corwin's voice, had an edge of impatience that went beyond concern for the pack. The human settlements have been pushing closer to our borders for months. This could be their way in. Send a female, make us soft, and make us hesitate. I can handle this for you, Theron. You don't need to trouble yourself with... The pups were dying. The alpha's voice cut through the argument like a blade. I felt their life force failing for 3 days. Every healer we have said they were beyond saving. And somehow, this human female kept them alive long enough to carry them home. Silence. With respect, Corwin said, his tone suggesting the opposite. You've been through an ordeal. Perhaps the council should make this decision on your behalf. The council advises. I decide. That hasn't changed. Ren kept her eyes closed, kept her breathing even. She had learned long ago that people revealed more when they didn't know you were listening. And there was something about this Corwin that made her skin prickle with warning. How? A new voice asked. Female, older. How did she keep them alive? Pups that young, in that cold, without their mother's warmth. It shouldn't be possible. I don't know, Theron said. And until I do, she lives. Theron, Corwin began. That's my final word. Footsteps approached. Ren felt the air shift as someone crouched beside wherever she lay. She could sense his life force now, hot and fierce and thrumming with barely contained power. The Alpha. Close enough to touch. I know you're awake, he said quietly. Your heartbeat changed. Ren opened her eyes. He was even more overwhelming up close. The firelight carved shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp lines of his jaw, the hollows beneath his cheekbones. His frame dominated the space around her, broad-shouldered and imposing. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He looked like grief had eaten him from the inside and left only a shell behind. But his eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The pups, she managed. Her voice came out as a croak. Alive. The healers are with them now. He paused. Because of you. Ren exhaled slowly. At least that had worked. At least they had survived the journey. Good, she whispered. That's good. How did you do it? The question hung between them. Ren saw the others watching from across the room. A tall man with copper hair who must have been the one called Corwin, his arms crossed and his expression calculating. An older woman with silver streaks in her dark braids. Several others whose faces blurred together in her exhausted state. She could tell them the truth. She could explain what she was, what she could do. Why her village had branded her and burned her home and driven her into the wilderness to die. She could watch their expressions shift from suspicion to horror. I kept them warm, she said instead. Body heat. I wrapped them in my cloak and held them close. It was true enough. It just wasn't the whole truth. Theron's eyes narrowed slightly. She could see he didn't believe her, not entirely, but he didn't push. You walked through a killing blizzard for 3 days, he said. Carrying 3 pups, without supplies, without shoes. His gaze dropped to her feet, which she now realized were wrapped in bandages. Why? Because they were alive, and because no one else was coming for them. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or guilt. We searched. I know. We searched for 3 days. Every wolf in the pack. We found nothing. I know, Ren repeated. The ravine where I found them. The snow had covered the entrance. You wouldn't have seen it unless you knew exactly where to look. And you knew? I felt them. The admission slipped out before she could stop it. She saw his expression sharpen. The cold, she added quickly. I could feel how cold they were. I followed that. Lies layered on partial truths. It was how she had survived this long. Theron studied her for a long moment. Then he stood, and Ren felt the absence of his presence like the withdrawal of heat. You'll stay, he said. Across the room, Corwin stepped forward. I must formally object. The council should at least be consulted before. The council will be informed. Theron didn't look at him. You'll stay until the pups are fully healed. You have a gift for keeping things alive, whatever its source. You'll use it in their service. And after that? Ren asked. Theron's expression didn't change. After that, you leave. This isn't your home. You aren't pack. You're human, and there's no place for your kind here. Ren nodded slowly. She had expected worse. She had expected death. A temporary stay, even as a prisoner, was more than she had any right to hope for. I understand, she said. Do you? He leaned closer and she caught his scent, something wild and deep and edged with frost. Let me be very clear. You will not leave the territory without escort. You will not speak to the pups' nursemaids without permission. You will not wander where you aren't invited. You exist here on my sufferance alone. The moment you become a threat, the moment you do anything that endangers my pack or my children, you will die. Is that understood? Yes. Good. He straightened, and something in his face closed off completely. Whatever emotion had flickered there when he'd seen his pups alive was gone now, locked behind walls of ice. He turned and walked out without another word. Corwin lingered, his eyes finding Wren's. Temporary, he said softly, and there was something like a promise in the word. Then he followed the alpha out. Wren lay back against the furs and stared at the ceiling. She had survived the blizzard. She had survived the wolves. Now she just had to survive being useful enough to stay alive, and invisible enough to keep her secret. Neither would be easy. But then again, nothing in Wren's life had ever been easy. 3 days passed before Wren was allowed to see the pups again. 3 days of being confined to a small room at the edge of the main hall, brought food by servants who wouldn't meet her eyes, watched by guards who clearly wished they had permission to tear her throat out. 3 days of healing and waiting and wondering if each footstep outside her door would be the one that ended with her death. On the 4th morning, the door opened, and the older woman she had seen that first night stepped inside. "I'm Morven," the woman said. Her voice was brisk but not unkind. "Head healer. You'll be working under my supervision from now on." Wren pushed herself upright. Her feet were still bandaged, but the pain had faded to a dull ache. The pups? Alive. Recovering, though not as quickly as we'd hoped. Morven's eyes were sharp, assessing. "That's why you're here. Whatever you did to keep them alive in that blizzard, they seem to do better when you're near." Wren's heartbeat quickened. "I don't know what Save it." Morven held up a hand. "I've been healing wolves for 40 years. I know when something doesn't add up. 3 pups, days from death, kept alive by body heat alone? No." She shook her head. "You did something. I don't know what, and frankly, I don't care. All I care about is that those children live. If your presence helps them, then you'll be present. Understood?" Wren nodded slowly. "Good. Follow me." The nursery was warmer than the rest of the hall, heated by a massive fireplace and lined with soft furs. 3 small bundles lay in a nest of blankets near the hearth, attended by 2 wolves in human form who looked up with barely concealed hostility when Wren entered. "Out," Morven said. "Both of you. I'll call if we need you." They left, but not before shooting Wren looks that promised violence if they ever caught her alone. "Don't mind them," Morven said. "They're loyal to their alpha. They don't understand why he's allowing this." "Neither do I," Wren admitted. Morven's lips quirked, almost a smile. "That makes all of us." She gestured toward the pups. "Go on. They need to feel you near." Wren approached slowly, her chest tight with emotion. The pups were small, so wonderfully small, their fur soft and dark like their father's. 2 were sleeping, their breathing even and peaceful. But the third, the smallest, was restless, whimpering softly, his tiny body twitching as if he couldn't get comfortable. "That's Solon," Morven said, nodding toward the restless one. "The others are Bram and Lyra. Solon was the weakest when you brought them in. He's fighting harder than his siblings." Without thinking, Wren knelt beside the nest and reached out. The moment her fingers touched Solon's fur, she felt it. The same thread of life force she had followed through the blizzard, faint and flickering but unmistakably present. And beneath that, something else. A coldness in his core that shouldn't be there, an echo of the death that had almost claimed him. Her gift stirred inside her like embers catching wind. "He's still fighting," she whispered. "Bram and Lyra are healing, but Solon is still..." Still what? Morven's voice was sharp. Wren caught herself. Still scared, she said carefully. He remembers the cold. He can't let go of it. Morven was silent for a long moment. When Wren glanced up, the healer was watching her with an expression that was far too knowing. There was something else there too, a strange flicker of recognition, as though Wren's face reminded her of someone she couldn't quite place. You feel things, Morven said slowly. Things you shouldn't be able to feel. It wasn't a question. Wren's mouth went dry. There was a girl in my village once, Morven continued as if she hadn't heard. Human village, before I was turned. She could tell when someone was dying before any healer could see it. She could hold their hand and sometimes, just sometimes, they'd recover when everyone had given them up for lost. She paused. They burned her for it. Ice flooded Wren's veins. I'm not going to ask what you are, Morven said. I'm not going to tell anyone else either. Not until you're ready to reveal the truth yourself. But you should know that secrets have a way of coming out in Thornhall. And when this one does... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The door opened and both women turned. Theron stood in the entrance, his silver eyes sweeping the room before landing on Wren. On her hand, still resting on Solin's fur. What are you doing? His voice was ice. Checking on them? Wren said quickly, pulling her hand back. The healer asked me to... I asked her to tend to Solin, Morven interrupted smoothly. The smallest one. He's been struggling more than his siblings. Theron's jaw tightened. He crossed the room in 3 strides and crouched beside the nest, his massive frame somehow gentle as he reached for his son. The pup stirred at his touch, let out a soft sound, then settled against his father's palm. He's warm, Theron said. There was wonder in his voice, and grief, and something that sounded almost like hope. He's improving, Morven said. Slowly, but with proper care. He'll live? They'll all live. Theron closed his eyes. For one moment the mask slipped, and Wren saw the raw devastation underneath. This man had buried his mate. He had thought he'd buried his children too. And now here they were, alive, breathing, because a human stranger had carried them out of the snow. When he opened his eyes again, the walls were back in place. He stood, and his gaze found Wren's. You'll move to the chamber next to the nursery, he said. You'll be available day and night if they need you. I understand. This doesn't change anything. His voice hardened. You're still Omega, still human, still temporary. I know. And you're still hiding something. Wren's breath caught. Theron stepped closer and suddenly there was barely any space between them. She could feel the heat of him despite the coldness in his eyes. She could smell pine and smoke and something wild underneath. I will find out what it is, he said quietly. Whatever secret you're keeping, whatever you really did to save my children, I will learn the truth. Wren held his gaze, though every instinct screamed at her to look away, to submit, to run. When you do, she said softly, will you still let me live? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then his features softened almost imperceptibly, revealing something she couldn't name. That depends, he said, on what the truth is. He turned and walked out, leaving Wren standing in the warm nursery with 3 small pups and the cold certainty that her secret was already slipping through her fingers. She had bought herself time, but time, she knew, had a way of running out. The ceremony took place at moonrise. Wren had not been told what to expect. She had simply been summoned from the nursery by 2 guards who escorted her through the winding corridors of Thornhall's main keep and out into the central courtyard. The cold hit her immediately, sharp and clean, but nothing like the killing freeze of the blizzard. This was manageable. This was survivable. The entire pack had gathered. Wren's steps faltered as she took in the scene. Dozens of wolves in human form stood in a loose circle around a raised stone platform. Torches burned at intervals, casting flickering shadows across hard faces and watchful eyes. And at the center of the platform stood Theron, dressed in black, his silver gaze fixed on her as she approached. She had never felt more human than in this moment, more fragile, more utterly out of place. "Kneel," one of her escorts said, and Ren obeyed without hesitation. The stone was cold beneath her knees. She kept her head bowed, her chest tight with anticipation. Theron's voice carried across the silent courtyard. 3 weeks ago, my children were lost to the storm. 3 weeks ago, I buried empty graves because I believed they were beyond saving. A pause. I was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This human female carried my pups through a 3-day blizzard. She brought them home when my own pack could not find them. She kept them alive when every healer in Thornhall had given up hope. Another pause, longer this time. For that, she has earned the right to remain among us. Ren risked a glance upward. Theron was looking directly at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. But she is not pack, he continued. She is not wolf. She is human, and humans have betrayed our kind for generations beyond counting. She will live among us, but she will live as Omega, the lowest rank, the last to eat, the first to serve, the one who belongs to no one and nothing. The words should have stung. Omega was barely a step above slave and wolf hierarchy. But Ren heard something else beneath the formal pronouncements. She heard a man trying to justify mercy to a pack that wanted blood. She heard someone saving her life while pretending he didn't care if she lived or died. "Approach," Theron commanded. Ren rose on unsteady legs and walked to the platform. Each step felt like a mile. She could feel the hostility radiating from the assembled wolves, could smell their distrust like smoke in the air. They didn't want her here. Most of them probably hoped she would give them an excuse to end her. Near the front of the crowd, she caught Corwin watching her with an expression of cold calculation. He stood with his arms crossed, and when their eyes met, he smiled. It was not a kind smile. She climbed the 3 stone steps and stood before the Alpha. Up close, he was overwhelming. The torchlight played across his features, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face, the darkness of his hair, the pale silver of his eyes that seemed to glow in the flickering light. He was striking in the way a winter storm was striking. Dangerous and cold and impossible to look away from. "Give me your hand," he said. Ren extended her right hand, palm up. She didn't know what to expect. A brand, perhaps. A mark of ownership. Some physical symbol of her servitude. What she did not expect was his thumb pressing against the center of her palm. Gentle and warm despite everything she knew about him. "By my authority as Alpha of Thornhall," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard, "I bind this human to our territory. She may not leave without permission. She may not harm any member of this pack. She may not reveal our secrets to outsiders." His eyes met hers. "In exchange, she will have shelter, food, and protection for as long as she remains useful to us." "I accept," Ren said. The words came out steadier than she felt. Theron's thumb traced a small circle against her palm, and she felt something shift in the air around them. Not magic exactly, but something close to it. A connection forming, faint and undeniable. The pack bond, she realized. Or some pale shadow of it. She could sense them now. All of them. Their life forces pressing against her awareness. But the connection was one-directional. She could feel them. They could not feel her. "It's done," Theron said. He released her hand, and Ren felt the absence like a physical loss. "You belong to Thornhall now." The crowd began to disperse. Ren stood frozen on the platform trying to process what had just happened. She was bound to this place. Bound to these wolves who wanted her dead. Bound to an Alpha who looked at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Morven appeared at her elbow. "Come," the healer said quietly. "The pups will be waking soon." Ren followed, grateful for the excuse to escape the courtyard and the weight of so many hostile stares. But as she walked, she couldn't shake the memory of Theron's touch against her palm. Warm. He had been warm. For a man they called the Ice Alpha, that felt like a secret all its own. The nightmares came for him 3 weeks after the binding ceremony. Ren knew because she heard him through the walls. The nursery was adjacent to his private chambers, a fact that made practical sense, but left her lying awake night after night, listening to sounds she wasn't meant to hear. Most nights, there was only silence. Occasionally, muffled footsteps, the scratch of a quill against paper. But this night, there were screams. She was on her feet before she fully woke, her blood surging, her gift flaring to life without her permission. Through the stone walls, she could feel his life force thrashing like a trapped animal. Pain and fear and grief, so raw it made her eyes sting. The pups stirred in their nest, whimpering at the disturbance. Solon was the most agitated, his small body trembling, while Bram and Lyra pressed closer together for comfort. Ren hesitated, torn between her duty to them and the pull of something she couldn't name. The screaming stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Ren settled the pups with gentle touches, waiting until their breathing evened out before she made her decision. She crossed to the door that connected the nursery to the Alpha's chambers. It was meant to be locked from his side. It wasn't. She pushed it open and stepped into darkness. The room was cold. Colder than it should have been. Colder than any room with a living wolf inside it. Ren could see almost nothing. Just vague shapes of furniture and the pale rectangle of a window letting in distant moonlight. And there, on the bed, a figure that wasn't moving. "Alpha?" she whispered. No response. She moved closer, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. As her eyes adjusted, she could make out more details. He was tangled in the furs, his chest bare, his skin pale despite the fever burning through him. His breathing was shallow and rapid. His face, what she could see of it, was twisted in an expression of pure agony. Still dreaming, she realized, or trapped somewhere between dream and waking, caught in whatever horror his mind had conjured. She should leave. She should go back to the nursery and pretend she hadn't heard anything. This was the Alpha of Thornhall, the most powerful wolf in the territory. He didn't need help from a human Omega. He would probably kill her for seeing him like this. But his life force was guttering like a candle in a storm, and Ren had never been able to walk away from something in pain. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her hand found his forehead, and she flinched at the temperature. He was burning up, far hotter than even a wolf should run. Fever or something like it. Something wrong. "Theron," she said softly. Using his name felt dangerous, forbidden. "Theron, wake up." His eyes flew open. For one terrible moment she saw nothing human in them. Just wolf, wild and panicked, ready to tear apart anything within reach. His hand shot out and closed around her throat, and Ren went perfectly still. "It's me," she whispered. "It's Ren, the human, the one who brought your pups home." Recognition flickered. His grip loosened but didn't release. "What are you doing here?" His voice was a ragged growl. "I heard you screaming. I thought—" She swallowed against the pressure of his fingers. "I thought something was wrong." Something is always wrong. But his hand fell away and he pushed himself upright, the furs pooling around his waist. In the darkness, she could see the gleam of his eyes and nothing else. "You shouldn't be here." "I know." "Then why are you?" "Because I felt you dying," she thought. "Because my gift dragged me out of sleep and wouldn't let me ignore your pain." "Because the pups need their father," she said instead. "And you sounded like you needed help." Silence stretched between them. She could hear his breathing slowly evening out, could feel the wild thrashing of his life force settling into something calmer. "I don't need help," he said finally. Especially not from you. Everyone needs help sometimes. A harsh laugh. Is that what you think? That you can help me? He leaned closer, and suddenly she could smell him. Pine and smoke and something darker underneath. Something wounded. You don't know what lives inside me. You don't know what I've done. What I've lost. Then tell me. The words hung in the air, reckless and impossible. Ren didn't know where they had come from. She only knew that sitting here in the darkness with this wounded, formidable man, she wanted to understand him more than she had wanted anything in a very long time. Theron was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly, her name was Sarah, my mate. She died 3 years ago. Ren's breath caught. The pregnancy weakened her. The healers warned me, but we thought she was strong enough. His voice cracked. I felt her life drain away. I felt the bond snap. And ever since, I've been cold. Even in summer. Even in front of a roaring fire. Cold in a way that never stops. Ren thought of his icy presence, the frost that seemed to radiate from him even when he was calm. She had assumed it was simply who he was. Now she understood it was something else entirely. Grief. Frozen grief. Lodged so deep in his body that even his wolf couldn't burn it out. I'm sorry, she whispered. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Don't be. It was my fault. I should have known the pregnancy was too much for her. I should have stopped it somehow. Instead, He stopped, drew a shaking breath. Instead, I lost my mate and nearly lost my children too. You didn't lose them. Only because of you. His voice was strange now, heavy with something she couldn't identify. A human. Of all things. A human saved what I could not. Ren didn't know what to say to that. She reached out instead, her fingers finding his hand in the darkness. His skin was still too hot, fever warm, but he didn't pull away. You should go, he said. I know. Neither of them moved. His fingers curled around hers, and Ren felt her chest tighten. This was dangerous. This was impossible. She was human. He was wolf. And there was no world in which this ended well for either of them. But his grip was gentle, and his breathing had finally steadied. And when he spoke again, his voice was soft with something that sounded almost like wonder. Why don't you fear me? Should I? Everyone else does. Ren considered this. She thought about his silver eyes and his frozen grief, and the way the entire pack moved around him like he was a storm that might break at any moment. Maybe, she said finally, but fear has never stopped me from doing what needed to be done. He laughed then, just a breath of sound, but real. No, he said, I suppose it hasn't. They sat in the darkness for a long time, hands intertwined, not speaking. And when Ren finally slipped back to the nursery, she carried the warmth of his touch with her like a secret flame. Something had shifted between them. She didn't know what it was or what it meant. She only knew that she was no longer just surviving in Thornhall. She was beginning to feel something far more dangerous than that. After that night, everything changed. Theron began appearing in the nursery. Not constantly, not obviously, but more often than an alpha should. He would come in the early mornings, before the rest of the pack stirred, and sit beside the nest where his pups slept. He would come in the late evenings after the day's duties were done and watch Ren tend to the children with an expression she couldn't read. At first, they barely spoke. He would ask about the pups' progress. She would report on their feeding, their growth, and the small milestones that marked their recovery. Professional conversations. Safe conversations. But the silences between the words began to stretch. And in those silences, something else grew. Solon, Theron said one evening, watching the smallest pup nurse from a bottle Ren held. He's always struggling. Even now. He fights harder because he has more to overcome. Ren adjusted her grip, making sure the pup could swallow easily. He was the closest to death when I found them. His body remembers that. It makes him stubborn. Like his mother, Theron murmured. Then he stiffened, as if he hadn't meant to say it aloud. Ren didn't push. She had learned that grief was a territory best approached sideways, with patience and time. Instead, she said, "He'll be the strongest of the three, I think, once he's fully grown. Bram has the size, and Lyra has the cleverness, but Solon has the will. The ones who fight hardest often end up the strongest." Theron was quiet for a moment. Then, "You speak like you know something about fighting to survive." It wasn't a question, but it felt like an invitation. "My village burned 6 months ago," Ren said. She kept her eyes on Solon, kept her voice even. "Raiders from the eastern settlements. They came at night. Most people didn't make it out. But you did." "I did." "How?" Ren hesitated. The truth pressed against her tongue, demanding release. She had never told anyone the full story. She had never trusted anyone enough. The aunt who had raised her after her mother died in childbirth had warned her never to speak of her gift. "Keep it hidden," her aunt had said, "or they'll burn you for it." But sitting here in the warm nursery, with Theron's steady presence beside her and his son in her arms, the words came anyway. "I felt them coming," she said quietly, "before anyone else knew they were there. I felt their hunger, their violence. It woke me from a dead sleep, and I ran before they reached my house." She could feel Theron's gaze sharpening. "You felt them?" "Yes. The way you felt my pups in the blizzard." It wasn't a question. Ren's hands tightened on the bottle. "Yes." Silence. Solon finished nursing and let out a small, satisfied sound. Ren set the bottle aside and tucked him back into the nest with Bram and Lyra. "What are you?" Theron asked finally. His voice was soft, but there was something intense underneath it. Not threat, exactly. Something closer to fascination. "I don't know what I am," she admitted. "I've always been able to feel things. Life, death, the energy that moves through living creatures. When I was a child, I thought everyone could do it. By the time I realized they couldn't..." She shook her head. It was too late. People had already started to notice, started to whisper. "Witch," Theron said. "Not an accusation, an observation. That's what they called me. Before the village burned, they were already talking about driving me out. Or worse." She laughed bitterly. "The raiders did me a favor, in a way. They destroyed the village before the village could destroy me." Theron was silent for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched her face, just a brush of his fingers against her cheek. The contact sent warmth flooding through her, startling in its intensity. "My pack would kill you if they knew," he said. "Witches are hunted here as surely as they are in human lands." A chill sank through Ren. "Then why are you telling me this? Why warn me instead of condemning me yourself?" His thumb traced along her cheekbone, tender despite the roughness of his hands. "Because you saved my children. Because you've shown me more kindness in a month than anyone has since Sarah died. Because..." He stopped, and something painful flickered across his face. "Because I'm tired of being cold, and you make me feel warm." Ren's lungs forgot their purpose. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "Whatever this is, it's dangerous for both of us." "I know. Your pack would never accept it. A human and an alpha. An omega and a..." "I know." His hand dropped from her face, but he didn't move away. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm not offering anything. I'm just..." He exhaled slowly. "I'm just telling you the truth. Because you deserve that much." Ren studied him in the firelight. This proud, wounded man who had lost so much and yet kept going. Who ruled a pack that feared him and grieved a mate he still dreamed about? who had somehow, against all odds, started to let her in. "I feel warm too," she said quietly. "When you're near. Warmer than I have any right to feel." His gaze changed. Hope, maybe. Or fear. Or both. "Don't say that," he said roughly. "Don't give me something I can't have." "I'm not giving you anything. I'm just telling you the truth." She offered a small smile. "Because you deserve that much." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fire crackled. The pups slept peacefully in their nest, and somewhere in the space between them, a bond was forming that neither had asked for, and neither could stop. Theron stood abruptly. "I should go." "Yes, you should." He paused at the door, looking back at her. In the flickering light, his expression was unreadable. "Ren," he said. "Yes? Don't let anyone else see what you can do. Promise me." "I promise." He nodded once, then left. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Ren was alone with 3 sleeping pups, and the echo of a touch that still burned against her skin. She was in trouble. Deep, irreversible trouble. And the worst part was, she didn't want to escape it. 3 months. That was how long it took for the pups to fully heal. Ren watched them tumble over each other in the nursery, yipping and growling and practicing the small shifts that would one day let them take human form. Solon, the smallest, had finally caught up to his siblings. His fur gleamed dark and healthy, his eyes bright with mischief. Bram, the largest, had his father's intensity, already trying to lead his siblings in their games. And Lyra was endlessly curious, investigating every corner of the nursery with determined focus. All 3 noticed when Ren entered a room, but Solon was always first to bound toward her with his tail wagging, first to curl against her warmth when the nights grew cold. They didn't need her anymore. Not really. She had known this day would come. Theron had been clear from the beginning. When the pups no longer need your warmth, you will be cast back into the cold you came from. Those were the terms. That was the bargain. So why hadn't he sent her away? The question haunted her as spring crept into Thornhall. The snows melted. The forest came alive with birdsong and new growth. And Ren remained, her position never questioned, her presence tolerated with increasing ease by a pack that had once wanted her dead. She told herself it didn't mean anything. She told herself Theron was simply being practical. The pups had bonded with her. Removing her suddenly might upset their development. That was all. But then, there were the nights. He still came to the nursery after dark, long after the pups had fallen asleep. He would sit beside her on the floor, close enough that their shoulders almost touched, and they would talk. About the pack, about his childhood, about the mate he had lost and the children he had almost lost, and the cold that still lived inside him, though it seemed to ease, just slightly, when she was near. She learned his favorite food was venison roasted with wild herbs. She learned he had a younger brother who had died in a border skirmish 15 years ago. She learned that before Sarah, before the grief, he had been a different man entirely. Quick to laugh, warm with his affection, the sort of alpha who inspired love rather than fear. She learned that he still dreamed of his mate, but the dreams were changing. Less painful now, less cold. "You should send me away," Ren said one night, when the silence between them had stretched too long. The pups were sleeping, Solon curled between Bram and Lyra, and their small bodies piled together in their nest. "The pups are healed. You have no reason to keep me." Theron didn't answer immediately. She could feel his gaze on her face, heavy and considering. "Is that what you want?" he asked finally. "To leave?" "No," she thought immediately. "No, I want to stay. I want to stay with you." But she couldn't say that. She couldn't give voice to the impossible thing growing between them, the bond that shouldn't exist, and the feelings that could only end in disaster. "What I want doesn't matter," she said instead. "I'm Omega. I'm human. I serve at your pleasure. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give. Theron was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in the darkness. The gesture was becoming familiar. Too familiar. Every time he touched her, it became harder to remember why she should pull away. "What if I don't want you to leave?" he asked softly. Ren's heart stuttered. "Theron? What if I want you to stay? Not as Omega, not as nursemaid." His grip tightened. "What if I want you to stay as something else entirely?" Air vanished from her lungs. She could only feel the warmth of his hand and the impossible hope blooming in her chest. "Your pack would never accept it," she whispered. "My pack will accept what I tell them to accept. They would call me witch. They would demand my death. They would have to go through me first." The ferocity in his voice made her eyes sting. No one had ever protected her like this. No one had ever wanted to. "Why?" she asked, and her voice broke on the word. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Theron released her hand. For one terrible moment she thought he was pulling away, thought she had pushed too far, asked too much. But then his palm cupped her face, tilting her chin up until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. "Because you brought my children back from the dead," he said. "Because you sit with me in the darkness when no one else dares to come close. Because when I'm with you, I remember what warmth feels like." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Because I think I'm falling in love with you, and I don't know how to stop it." Ren's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the space of a single breath. "Theron," she whispered. The door burst open. Corwin stood in the entrance, his copper hair wild, his face twisted with rage. Behind him stood two other wolves, their expressions grim. "I knew it," Corwin snarled. "I knew there was something wrong with her. Something unnatural." Theron was on his feet in an instant, his body positioning itself between Ren and the intruders. "What is the meaning of this?" "She's a witch, Theron." Corwin's voice dripped with contempt. "I've been watching her. The way she knows things she shouldn't know. The way the pups respond to her touch. The way she brought them back when every healer said they were beyond saving." He pointed at Ren with a trembling finger. "She's not human. She's an abomination. And you've been letting her poison your mind." The pups woke, startled by the commotion. They began to whimper, and Ren moved instinctively toward them. One of the wolves behind Corwin lunged to intercept her. Theron's growl stopped everyone cold. "Touch her," he said quietly, "and I will tear out your throat." The wolf retreated, but Corwin didn't back down. "You're compromised," Corwin said. "Can't you see that? She's enchanted you somehow, made you forget your duty to the pack, your loyalty to Sarah's memory." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost pleading. "Theron, I've known you since we were pups. You're my alpha, my friend. But this isn't you. The man I know would never choose a human witch over his own kind." "Corwin, call a pack tribunal," Corwin interrupted. "Let the elders examine her. If I'm wrong, I'll accept whatever punishment you deem fit." "But if I'm right?" His eyes found Ren's. "If I'm right, she burns." The tribunal was held at dawn. Ren stood in the center of the great hall, her hands bound in front of her with silver-threaded rope that burned against her skin. The entire pack had gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity, hostility, and fear. She could feel their emotions pressing against her awareness like physical weights. At the head of the hall, Theron sat in the Alpha's chair. His face revealed nothing, but Ren could feel the turmoil beneath his surface, the rage and terror and desperate love that threatened to shatter his careful control. Morven stood to her left, silent and watchful. The healer had said nothing when the guards came for Ren in the night. But there had been something in her eyes, something that looked almost like guilt, as though she had expected Ren to reveal the truth herself and was now uncertain how to intervene. The charge is witchcraft, Corwin announced, his voice ringing through the hall. The accused used unnatural powers to infiltrate our pack, bewitch our alpha, and corrupt our future heirs. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. What evidence do you present? Theron's voice was ice. Corwin gestured, and one of his wolves stepped forward carrying a small leather pouch. 3 weeks ago, I found this hidden in her chambers. Herbs and ritual stones used in witch magic. Blood rituals. Wren stared at the pouch. She had never seen it before in her life. That's not mine, she said. Silence. Corwin's eyes blazed. You'll have your chance to speak. I've also collected testimony, Corwin continued, addressing the pack. Servants who saw her whispering over the pups while they slept. Guards who noticed her wandering at odd hours. And most damning of all, he paused for effect. The alpha's own behavior. In 3 months, he's gone from a man still grieving his mate to someone willing to take a human omega into his bed. The hall erupted. Wren felt her face flush with humiliation. Enough. Theron's voice cut through the chaos. You've made your accusations. Now let the accused speak. All eyes turned to Wren. She could lie. She could deny everything, claim the evidence was planted, and play the innocent victim. Corwin's case was circumstantial at best. There was a chance, a slim chance, that she could talk her way out of this. But then she looked at Theron's face, and she knew she couldn't lie to him anymore. I'm not a witch, she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Not in the way you mean. I don't practice blood magic or cast curses or commune with demons. Then what are you? One of the elders demanded. Wren took a breath. I was born with a gift. I can feel life force, the energy that flows through all living things. When your pups were dying in that blizzard, I felt their heartbeats fading. I followed that thread through the storm until I found them. She paused. And then I used my gift to keep them alive. I shared my own life force with them, wrapped them in my own warmth, and sustained them with my own strength until I could bring them home. Silence. Absolute deafening silence. She admits it, Corwin breathed. She admits she used unnatural. What I did saved 3 children, Wren cut in. What I did brought your alpha's heirs back from the dead. If that makes me a monster, then so be it. I won't apologize for saving innocent lives. She looked at Theron then, meeting his silver eyes directly. I never enchanted you, she said softly. I never used my gift on you without your knowledge. What grew between us, that was real. All of it was real. Something cracked in Theron's expression, pain and love and desperate longing. Theron, don't listen to her, Corwin warned. She's manipulating you even now. Theron stood slowly. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. The evidence against her is planted, he said quietly. Corwin's face went pale. What? I had Morven examine those herbs. They're common medicines. Nothing more. The ritual stones you added yourself, taken from the healer's storeroom. Theron's voice was deadly calm. You've been trying to undermine her since the moment she arrived. The question is why? I was protecting the pack. You were protecting yourself. Theron stepped down from the alpha's chair, stalking toward his second-in-command. You thought that if I remained frozen in grief forever, you could control the pack through me. A puppet alpha, too lost in mourning to challenge your authority. But then she came, and I started to thaw, and that terrified you. Corwin's expression shifted from outrage to something uglier. She's a witch, Theron. Whatever else she is, she's a witch. You know the law. You know what has to happen. I know the law, Theron agreed. I also know who wrote it. He turned to face the pack, and his voice carried to every corner of the hall. 200 years ago, a wolf alpha made a bargain with a witch. He promised to love her in exchange for power over death itself. The ability to survive any wound, any illness, and any threat to his rule. The witch granted his wish. But when the ritual was complete, he discarded her. Cast her out like refuse. She had outlived her usefulness. He paused. So she cursed him. Gasps from the assembled wolves. The full truth had been kept secret for generations, passed only from alpha to alpha. Most of the pack had never heard it spoken aloud. Any king in his line who fell in love would watch his beloved die, Theron continued, and he would carry the cold of her death in his bones until his own ending. Sarah didn't die from the pregnancy alone, Theron said, his voice breaking. She was killed by the curse. The strain of carrying the pups weakened her, but it was the curse that finished her. The moment I admitted I loved her, her death was sealed. And when she died, the cold entered me, just as it's entered every alpha in my line who made the mistake of loving. He looked at Ren, and there was so much grief in his eyes that it stole her breath. I let you stay at first because you were human, he said. Because I thought I could never love a human. I thought you would be safe. I thought I would be safe. A bitter laugh. I was wrong. Theron, Ren whispered. What are you saying? I'm saying that Corwin is right about one thing. His voice broke. I love you. And that means you're going to die. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, because that's exactly what they were. Ren's mind spun. A curse. A centuries-old curse that killed anyone the Alpha loved. Sarah hadn't died from complications alone. She had died because Theron had loved her too much. And now he loved Ren. No, she said, shaking her head. No, there has to be a way. There isn't. Theron's voice was hollow. Don't you think I've searched? Don't you think I've spent years trying to find a cure? The witch who cast the curse is long dead. Her magic died with her. There's nothing left to break. Then I'll leave. Ren pulled against her restraints. I'll go right now. You can forget me. You can. It doesn't work like that. His hand found her face, his touch desperately gentle. I've already loved you. The curse is already active. The only question now is how long you have. Ren stared at him, horror and heartbreak warring in her chest. How long did Sarah have? 3 months. From the moment I told her I loved her to the moment she died. His voice cracked. I thought the pregnancy killed her. I blamed myself for that. But it was the curse all along. The curse I triggered the day I admitted what she meant to me. 3 months. Ren had 3 months to live. No. A voice cut through the silence. Everyone turned. Morven stepped forward, her face pale but determined. There is another way, the healer said. There's always been another way. Your ancestors were simply too proud or too frightened to take it. Theron's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Morven took a breath. The curse wasn't just a punishment, it was a test. The witch who cast it, she was betrayed by that alpha 200 years ago. He promised to love her, then discarded her when she was no longer useful. So she cursed him, and every alpha after him. We know this, Corwin spat. It's ancient history. What you don't know, Morven continued, her voice rising, is that the witch left a way out. Not because she was merciful, but because she wanted to see if any alpha would ever be worthy of love again. What way? Ren demanded. Morven's eyes met hers. A life for a life. The alpha must be willing to die for the one he loves. Not symbolically. Actually. He must stand at the edge of death and choose to fall, with no guarantee of survival. She paused. Only then will the curse break. That's insane, Corwin said. You're asking our alpha to kill himself on the word of a, I'll do it? Everyone went still. Theron's voice was quiet, but there was no hesitation in it. If my death will break the curse, I'll do it, right now. No. Ren pulled against her bonds with desperate strength. No, you can't. Solon and Bram and Lyra need you. Your pack needs you. My children need a father who can love without destroying. My pack needs an alpha who isn't walking through the world half dead. He cupped her face in his hands, And you need to live. That matters more to me than anything else." Tears streamed down Ren's face. "Theron, please. Wait." Morven's voice was sharp. "There's more. The curse can be broken another way. The witch's bloodline. If any descendant of hers still lives, they could undo what was done. Blood magic can only be broken by blood." "The witch died centuries ago," Theron said. Her line ended with her. "Did it?" Morven stepped toward Ren, her eyes suddenly intense. "Child, you said your village burned, that raiders destroyed everything. But before that, did you ever know your mother?" Cold dread pooled in Ren's stomach. "What? Your mother? Do you know where she came from? Who her people were?" "She died when I was born. My aunt raised me. She never spoke much about my mother's past." Ren's voice trembled. "Why? What does that have to do with—" "Because I recognize your gift." Morven's voice was barely a whisper now. "I've seen it only once before, in a woman who passed through my village 40 years ago. A woman with eyes like yours, and hair like yours, and powers like yours. A woman who said she was the last of a cursed line, searching for a place where her children might finally be safe." The hall had gone utterly silent. "That woman's name," Morven said slowly, "was Isadora. She was a descendant of the witch who cursed the wolves of Thornhall. She had a daughter whom she placed with a trusted family before disappearing. That daughter grew up, married, and died giving birth to a baby girl." Ren's breath abandoned her. "No, that's not possible. It's more than possible. It's the only explanation for what you can do." Morven gripped her shoulders. "You're not just a human with a gift, child. You're the key to breaking a curse that has haunted this pack for 200 years. Your blood is the cure." Ren stood at the altar stone in the heart of Thornhall. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Around her, the entire pack had gathered in a massive circle, their faces solemn and watchful. At her side stood Theron, his hand gripping hers so tightly it almost hurt. Morven had explained what needed to happen. A ritual, an offering of blood freely given from both the cursed line and the victim of the curse. Their blood mingled on the altar stone where the original bargain had been struck 2 centuries ago. It might work. It might not. If it failed, Ren would die within 3 months, and Theron would spend the rest of his life frozen in grief once more. Solon, Bram, and Lyra would grow up without a mother figure. The pack would continue under the shadow of a curse no one could break. But if it succeeded— "Are you certain?" Theron asked quietly. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Whatever happens, our blood will be bound. Our fates will be intertwined." Ren looked up at him. At this wounded, formidable man who had shown her kindness when she expected cruelty, who had protected her when his own pack wanted her dead, who had chosen to love her even knowing what it would cost. "I've never been more certain of anything," she said. He kissed her forehead, then nodded to Morven. The healer stepped forward with the silver blade. "The words must be spoken together. The blood must flow at the same moment, and both of you must mean what you say, or the magic will fail." She handed the blade to Theron first. He drew it across his palm without flinching, and dark blood welled from the wound. Then she handed it to Ren. The silver burned against her skin, but she made the cut anyway, watching her own blood rise to the surface. "Now," Morven said, "place your hands together over the stone. Let your blood mingle. And speak the words." Ren pressed her wounded palm against Theron's. The contact was electric, a surge of power that made her gasp. She could feel her gift responding, feel the life force flowing between them like a river finding its course. Together they spoke the words Morven had taught them. Blood to blood, life to life, curse to cure. What was broken by betrayal, let it be healed by love freely given. What was bound in hatred, let it be released in sacrifice. We offer ourselves, one for the other, now and always. Their mingled blood dripped onto the altar stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stone began to glow. White light erupted from beneath their joined hands, spreading outward in ripples that washed over the entire clearing. Ren felt something tearing inside her, something old and dark and rotten being ripped away. She heard Theron cry out, felt his grip tighten on her hand, felt the cold that had lived in him for so long finally beginning to break. The light grew brighter, brighter still. And then, it was over. Ren collapsed. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. When she opened her eyes, Theron's face was above hers, and he was crying. Actually crying. Tears streaming down his cheeks, his expression shattered with relief and joy and love. It worked, he breathed. I can feel it. The cold is gone. The curse is broken. The pups, Ren managed. Are they safe? The curse died with the ritual. They'll never carry it. Their children will never carry it. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. You saved us. You saved all of us. Ren clung to him, too overwhelmed to speak. Around them, she could hear the pack murmuring, could feel their emotions shifting from fear and suspicion to something warmer, something like hope. Morven's voice cut through the stillness. The curse is broken, but there's still the matter of her status. She's human. She's Omega. The law says what I decide it says. Theron rose, pulling Ren up with him. His arm stayed around her waist, holding her close. This woman saved my children. She broke a curse that has plagued my family for 2 centuries. She risked her life for a pack that wanted her dead. His voice rang out across the clearing. She is no longer Omega. She is no longer just human. From this day forward, she is my mate, my queen, and anyone who disputes that will answer to me. Silence. Then, one by one, the wolves began to kneel. Corwin was the last. His face was twisted with resentment, but even he couldn't deny what they had all witnessed. The curse was broken. The Alpha was whole. And the human woman who had stumbled out of a blizzard carrying 3 dying pups had somehow become the salvation of them all. 6 months later, Ren stood in the nursery, watching 3 young wolves tumble across the floor. They could shift now, clumsily and imperfectly, but they were learning fast. Solon was still the smallest, still the most stubborn, still the first to seek out her warmth when the nights grew cold. Bram had his father's intensity, already trying to lead his siblings in their games, and Lyra was endlessly curious, investigating every corner of the nursery with determined focus. But all 3 were strong now, healthy, alive. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back against Theron's chest. He was warm. Actually warm, his body running hot the way a wolf's should. The council meeting went well? She asked. Corwin has requested reassignment to the northern border. Theron's voice was dry. He seems to feel the weather there would be more suited to his temperament. How tragic. Devastating. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Morven wants to talk to you about training other humans with gifts. She thinks there might be more out there. People like you who are hiding because they're afraid of what would happen if they were discovered. Warmth bloomed in Ren's chest. I'd like that. I thought you might. He turned her in his arms, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes. There's something else. Something I've been meaning to tell you. What? He smiled, and there was such warmth in it, such unguarded joy, that it made her eyes sting. Morven examined me this morning. She says the curse is completely gone. No trace of it left in my blood or my bond. That's wonderful. There's more. His hand dropped to her stomach, resting there gently. She also says you're pregnant. Ren's world stopped. What? A pup. Our pup. Theron's voice broke with emotion. Sarah couldn't survive pregnancy because the curse was draining her from the inside. But you You're strong, Ren. You're healthy, and you're going to give me another child. Tears spilled down Ren's cheeks. Words fled. She could only pull him close and hold on as tightly as she could. Behind them, Solon, Bram, and Lyra continued to play, oblivious to the miracle unfolding in their nursery. Solon looked up, saw his father and his new mother embracing, and let out a small, happy howl. The others joined in. And somewhere in the depths of Thornhall, where the altar stone still stood, the last traces of an ancient curse faded into nothing. The wolves of Thornhall had mourned their lost pups. They had buried empty graves and prepared for endless winter. But a human woman had walked out of the snow, carrying life in her arms, and everything had changed. She had saved the pups. She had broken the curse. She had thawed the heart of an alpha who thought he would never feel warmth again. And in doing so, she had found something she never thought she'd have: a home, a family, a love that would last forever. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more tales like this one, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought of Ren and Theron's journey. I read every single comment, and your words mean more than you know. Until next time.